Target locked. Detonate. Pathogen neutralized. Moving to next.
This is going to be my fourth video on kefir, so I'm going to continue on with the different effects and benefits of many different aspects. Okay, now the first one to start off the video is a very critical and important one, and that is GLUT4, GLUT4, and basically kefir upregulates AMPK, therefore upregulating GLUT4 translocation to cell membrane. What GLUT4 does is that it increases glucose uptake in muscle-independent insulin. This also improves insulin sensitivity. The reason GLUT4 is important is to take excessive glucose out of the bloodstream so that the glucose goes into the cell. So GLUT4 kind of acts like an arm that comes out from the inside of the cell onto the outside of the cell to grab and scoop up glucose to pull the glucose into the cell. That's important to prevent excessive glucose from being out in the bloodstream, because if it's out in the bloodstream, it can cause stiff, rigid ECM, likely from advanced glycation end products created by sugar and high glucose out in the bloodstream. If the ECM is stiff, then immune cells cannot enter to attack cancer cells. Okay, so this next part is going to be about tumors taking up glucose as a fuel source after breaking a fast. And tumors, they actually sense insulin signaling due to high glucose, because glucose triggers an insulin response. But kefir might be able to downregulate or reduce the amount of glucose that is taken up by the tumor, because kefir actually is low glycemic, and since it's a fermented food, and causes a mild insulin response. So that means if breaking a fast with kefir was used instead of high glucose, the tumor would not sense the insulin spike, so the tumor will take up less, or better, no glucose at all. Also, kefir is actually, there's a less abrupt AMPK suppression because of kefir, because since kefir has low glucose or is low glycemic, this means that it will not suppress AMPK if a fast is broken or ended with kefir instead of a high glycemic or high glucose meal. That's because during fasting, AMPK is naturally elevated, and then breaking a fast with high glycemic foods or high glucose actually reduces AMPK, also increases insulin, and then the tumor senses the insulin and then takes the glucose as a fuel source. But that could be less likely to happen if kefir is used instead at the end of a fast. Okay, this part of the video is going to be about NFKB and how kefir affects it. So basically, NFKB is actually what drives AP1 loss and then exhausted T cells, because of the CD70 on the tumor and then CD27 on the immune cell. If that axis goes on too long, then that creates NFKB going on for too long. But kefir can actually help and inhibit the NFKB from translocating into the nucleus, because the NFKB has to go through that process of going into the nucleus after being phosphorylated. But kefir can actually reduce that NFKB entering. So kefir also reduces toll-like receptor signaling. So if you've seen my other videos on toll-like receptor 4, especially with gluten and the negative impact on immunity, then you'll know that kefir reverses that. So kefir does two things. It reduces the toll-like receptor 4 activation, since if it's chronic, that leads to weakened immunity, and kefir also boosts immunity at the same time. Okay, this part is going to be about high stress. Okay, so high stress causes ulcers in the stomach, um, eventually leading to or is seen in ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So it's basically inflammation of the colon. And this is featuring barrier dysfunction. And as I was explaining earlier, excessive NFKB. Also, immune cell infiltration. So I'll have to cover that in a different video because I don't want this one to be too long. But kefir has been shown to reduce NFKB activity in experimental colitis models. Also anti-inflammatory. Okay, the data is very limited on the following, but it is a CD27 and CD70 axis. So kefir reduces chronic inflammatory tone. What that ends up doing is that it reduces APC overactivation as well as CD70 overexpression. The reason that's critical for kefir to do that is because of excessive autoimmunity that is getting out of hand. It'll be out of hand if CD27, CD70 signaling is persistent, which will lead to excessive T cells attacking healthy tissues. So that's what happens in autoimmunity. So TLR, or short for toll-like receptor, activation, if TLR is activated, that is what is going to drive this CD27, CD70 axis that could lead to worsened autoimmunity. But kefir is known to reduce TLR, or toll-like receptor. So if kefir can do that, then kefir can also reduce excessive T cells attacking healthy bodily tissues due to worsened autoimmunity. Okay, so quick recap to close off the video. AMPK is an energy sensor. Kefir happens to upregulate it and prevents or slows the suppression of AMPK when tumors consume glucose after intermittent fasting. Tumors, that they can sense insulin signals caused by high glucose spikes after a high carb meal after fasting. But kefir can help reduce this insulin spike after a fast. Therefore, tumors sense less of an insulin signal and less glucose for the tumor. Also, kefir reduces NFKB at CD27, CD70 axis, therefore reducing excessive T cells that attack healthy bodily tissues. Kefir also reduces toll-like receptor signaling, therefore also reducing excessive T cell attack that way. So TLR is activated by lipopolysaccharides caused by gluten ingestion. And that can be inflammatory, but kefir can reduce that inflammatory reaction caused by gluten. High stress causes ulcers in the stomach, and kefir is known to reduce ulcers and ulcerative colitis as well as to reduce the inflammation caused by the ulcers. So that's it for the video. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.